as we get started, one thing that I wanted to apologize to you guys for is I think that I made a mistake in how I structured the name of this lesson. You know, English is such a complicated language, and for many of us, you know, it's not our first language. And I used the word caught and healing for women caught in sexual sin. And I know that sometimes that word means we found you, we discovered you doing something wrong. And I wanted to clarify that that is not what I meant when I was structuring the title of this lesson. The purpose was for the title to be trapped or captured. And so this is not something where we are accusers of women struggling with this sin, but something where we are recognizing that it is a trap and that it is, they are entangled in it and we need them come out of it. Just a couple of suggestions as we kind of get going. As we respond, let's just try to keep our responses short because I really do want to have a chance to talk to everybody. And I want to hear from you the struggles that you're having in countries. And there's going to be times for you guys to share details with me to help me teach better. And then also time to ask questions. If I think Amy normally tells us to put the name of our country by our name. And I had mine, but then I got bumped out. So we always love to see the countries that you're from. It helps us remember you better, helps us pray for you better. If you're having trouble hearing and or even having trouble where we can't hear you, as Melissa said earlier, turning off your video really does help. Technology has limitations. And please feel free as we go through this, if you think of a question, raise your hand. There's a way you can do that in the Zoom app, or even put your question, say, I have a question in the chat, and I'll pause as I can. Because we definitely want to make sure that we're all getting the best benefit out of today. Today we're going to be talking about now, I'm sorry, one more note. I'm going to be saying a lot of buzzwords. That's what we call them in America. A lot of very sensitive words. So if you have young children around you, I would encourage to try to be very careful for their young ears, because the delicate nature of this topic requires me to say a lot of words that maybe we don't want children to be hearing. So we're going to be talking about God's design for sex, problems of sexual sin, and we're really going to be talking about some of the differences between how women struggle with sexual sin versus how men struggle with sexual sin. There's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. We're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about how to heal. We're going to be talking about how to counsel with people going through this struggle. So this is a picture of me and my husband. We have been married for 13 years. And the amazing thing about sex, it is designed by God to unify a husband and wife and to help them be one flesh together. And, you know, I think that, especially if you've been a Christian for a long time, and, you know, me, I was raised in the church, so I've been a Christian since I was a very little girl. You hear the word one flesh, and sometimes you've heard it so many times it loses its meaning and loses its significance. But we are one person. There's nothing that can happen to me that doesn't impact my husband. And there's nothing that can happen to my husband that does not impact me. We are together on all things. Now, this does not mean that we are not individuals. We have our own choices. We have our own challenges. But in all of those things, we are unified. And that's how God designed it to be, which is beautiful and amazing. He's given us this ability to have a partner in this life in all things. And it's a great opportunity to fully understand, well, maybe not fully understand, but helps us understand more God's love. Because my husband knows everything about me, things that are hard, things that are beautiful. And I have very few secrets from him. And even if I did have secrets, he would sense something is off with my wife today. What is going on? It helps us understand God's love better, just like being a father and a mother helps us understand God's love better. So when we're looking at sexual sin and we want to fully understand what it is, it's easy to just say, oh, well, the Bible tells us not to do it, so that's what it is. But if we look a little bit deeper into it, it's it's a walking outside of God's perfect design. Okay. Just like any other sin, stealing, lying, all of those things, it doesn't just do something wrong, it comes out of something good. And it is a poor substitute. It will never fulfill us the way God's perfect design fulfills us. It is also overstimulating. We love sweets and candies and desserts, but if we only ate cakes and candies and ice cream, we would eventually get tired of them, and they would not taste as good as when we get to enjoy them as a treat. Sexual sin always harms the person engaging in it and harms those around them. You cannot engage in sexual sin and it have zero consequences. It is impossible. The other, and I think the more damaging part of sexual sin, is it attempts to have all of the fun, all of the enjoyment, with none of the responsibility. My husband and I are very intimate together, and we share unity, and that comes with responsibility. We have to nurture each other. We have to care for each other. And when my husband is sick, I don't get to have all of my needs met because I must care for my sick husband. And when I am busy or working, I can't stop everything and just do what my husband feels like doing. So we have to take care of each other. Whereas sexual sin, you get to have all of that like fun and enjoyment, but you don't have to take care of that person. And so therefore it's always going to be less intimate and cause more risks. The other thing that, I don't know how it is in every country, but in America, the lie that we have been told is that it's for your enjoyment. You get to do whatever you want, and there are no consequences. That it feels good, so do it. And the truth, though, that we're going to see later is that it comes with consequences physically in your body, in your heart, in your mind, and especially in your spiritual walk. So there is no sexual sin without consequences. So I would like to have a moment to hear from you guys. And again, remember to keep your answers as short as you can, but what is the most common sexual sin you see in your culture? Is it pornography? Is it having sex with someone you're not married to? Is it having sex when you're a teenager? Just, if you don't mind, comment in the comments or unmute and let us know what is something that you see a lot in your culture. And it's okay if no one wants to share. It's fine. It's a very delicate subject, yeah? Okay, hold on.
Holly in Ukraine said sex outside of marriage.
Yes. Very, very common. I know more about Africa than I do in Ukraine. But I think in Africa, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, brothers and sisters, but there is a lot of secretness around sexual sin. In America, we're very, very proud of our sexual sin, which is very, very sad. But people boast and say, look at how many people I have had sex with. I see Tanya says pornography. Yes, pornography is very big in America as well. But, I think there are some times where we probably don't even know what the most common sexual sin is because people aren't talking about it. And that's a problem we're going to be talking about as well. If you think of something else, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. But one thing that I think people struggle with is, in my experience, is people say, well, I don't believe in God. And so the only reason I should not be having sex outside of marriage is because God tells you to. So if I don't believe in God, it's not a problem for me. There has been a lot of studies done about the risks of having sex outside of marriage. And there are many, many risks. Obviously, we have sexually transmitted infections is a big one. And especially if the more people you have sex with, the more risks you have. But there's also cancer and long-term health complications. Men and women who have had sex with 10 or more people have nearly 50 to 60% chance more of having cancer than people who have only had sex with one person, which is a huge difference. We also see that people who have sex outside of marriage, they have more mental health problems, depression, anxiety, etc. Another interesting thing is that there's a lie in America, and maybe in your country too, where sex outside of marriage is fun, sex inside of marriage is boring. It is not interesting because you are only doing it with one person. But again, the studies show that actually people who have sex inside their marriage only have more fulfilled sexual lives than those who have sex with many people. So, but Satan is very good at his lies, is he not? He wants to convince us of all of these things. When we are talking with a woman or a man caught in sexual sin, if they have come to the point where they realize that what they're doing is wrong, which they do have to come to on their own. You cannot force someone to believe that their behavior is wrong. But when they come to that point, a lot of times there is shame. And they have shame if they are still engaging in that relationships or those, those fake relationships. And then they have shame if it's in their past. Satan tells them that you cannot tell anyone about this. You cannot be made clean again. You are dirty. You are used up. He lies and says, you cannot stop doing this. You've been having this type of sexual sin for so long. You don't know how to be without it. You can't be fulfilled otherwise. So there's a lot of lies that we uncover, and they are all around shame. And so we're going to look at a couple of Bible verses. Did anyone want to read either Genesis 3, John 4, Luke 8, or Genesis 16? And in fact, actually, let me do Genesis 16. But if anybody wants to volunteer to do the others, I would love to let you read them.
I can read Genesis 3.
Yes, please.
Genesis 3, 8, and 9. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?"
Now, I love those verses because they were hiding because they did not want to tell God what they had done. They had sinned. They had eaten the fruit that God told them not to, and they realized they were naked, and they did not want to talk to God about it. So they hid. Now, what God did was not, oh no, my children are hiding from me, so I can't talk to them. He called out to them and said, "Where are you?" And it was not an easy conversation. God didn't say, "It's okay, no worries. You're allowed to sin, do whatever you want." It was a very hard conversation that God had with Adam and Eve, but he had it, and they were able to move forward, and they were able to heal. Does anybody want to read John 4 or Luke 8? I'm going to pull up John 4. If anybody would like to read Luke 8, you're more than welcome to let me know after I read John 4. Okay. There came a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." And Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." This is another great story where this woman had been in sexual sin for a very long time, and she was very ashamed. The time of day that she was coming to draw water, she came because no one else would be there. The women like to come gather the water in the pool in the morning before it gets very hot. And they also need the water to do their work for the day. But she waited until it was hot to where she knew everyone had already finished drawing water, because she did not want to be seen. She did not want to be talked to about her lifestyle. And Jesus came to her. He sent his disciples away so that they would have privacy. You will not find Jesus publicly humiliating any of his children, dragging her out in front of others and saying, "Look what she has done. Look at how bad of a person she is." He comes to you in private. And that is an example that we as leaders should follow. If we know that someone is caught in sexual sin and we know that they need help, we do not need to be addressing that in front of other people. That is something that is a one-on-one conversation between us and them and God. All right, does anybody want to read Luke 8?
I can read that one.
Go ahead.
Luke 8, 42 to 45. For he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you."
So another great story where a woman was too ashamed to say, Jesus, can you heal me? She felt like an outcast. She felt like she was dirty and unclean, which is something that we're going to see when we're helping people in this situation. We're going to see people who feel that way. And Jesus did not miss her. He didn't, she didn't touch him and he not know it. He is ready. He is there for these people, no matter how many times they've sinned, no matter how long they've been sinning. He is ready, and he is not afraid of what has happened to them. He is not afraid of all the other things. Jesus was surrounded by a crowd of people pushing and pressing and probably yelling and calling his name, but he knew the minute that his daughter reached out. All right, now I'm going to read Genesis 16. This is probably the most important passage that we're going to talk about within this topic. This story is about Hagar, who Abram used Hagar as a substitute for God's promise. God promised him a son. Abram and Sarai gave up that this promise was going to come from them, and so they entered into sexual sin. Abram slept with his wife's servant Hagar instead. It did not go well, and she was sent away. They used her and sent her away. And that is what we will see sometimes, especially when dealing with women in sexual sin. They are oftentimes used and sent away, maybe even multiple times. Now, starting in Genesis 16, starting in verse 7, now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her authority. Moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. The angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are with child, and you will bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has given heed to your affliction. And he will be a wild donkey of a man, and his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live to the east of all his brothers. And then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God who sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? So there are very few people in God's word who gave God a name. And Hagar is one of them. A woman caught in sexual sin, abandoned, a single mother of an unwanted child. Doesn't this sound like some of the women that we will interact with in our ministries? Unwanted, single mother, unwanted child, sexual sin, sexual harm. And she said, he is the God who sees me. Now, when we are dealing with shame, being seen doesn't necessarily feel good. When we first hear that, we're like, oh, someone saw me. Someone saw me when I was at my most vulnerable and at my most sinful. But when God says he sees, he doesn't mean, ha, I caught you. You're doing bad things. He means, I understand. I see what you're going through, and I want to help you. And I want to bless you. And again, when when the angel of the Lord spoke with Hagar, he did not say, guess what? Everything will be easy now. You do not have any more worries. He told her to go back to her mistress who had been abusive to her. So this is what God is going to tell us to do is not always going to be easy, but it is going to be said in love. And shame is not a good reason to turn away from God. It is the reason to turn to God so that he can help heal that shame from us. So we're going to talk a little bit more about who is at risk of sexual sin, especially when it comes to women. Sometimes we think, oh, it's just the young girls, maybe teenagers or in their 20s, but sexual sin can happen at any age. And the people who are most at risk of falling into sexual sin are anyone who does not know what the risks of those sin are. Anyone with trauma in their past, people who have grown up in broken families. If your father or your mother is not present in your life, your risk of sexual sin is much higher. Those who don't believe in God, of course, because they think, again, there are no risks, and I don't believe that there is a God to tell me no, so I'll do whatever I want. There's also the people who are seeking validation, who want love, but they don't know how to get love. And so they think that, oh, engaging in this sexual sin will give me love and help me feel better. People who are lonely or isolated, again, trying to feel like they have a family, but again, without that burden of responsibility. Anyone who is in emotional or mental or spiritual pain, and really any kind of pain, they might try to ease that pain with enjoying sexual pleasures with other people. So these people are not people who've had it super easy and we just want to enjoy ourselves. These are people with wounds and they're trying to heal those wounds. Another risk is to our children. The children around the world are exposed at younger and younger ages to sexual images and experiences. It used to be that children were more protected from seeing things of, especially a sexually sinful nature. They are also more likely to be exposed to images and videos that show sexual violence as normal. It is unfortunate what we are seeing happen to our children in this day and age. There are more children exploited and harmed sexually now than in any other time in history. Child slaves are an ever-growing problem, and the vast majority of child slaves are sexual slaves. Wounds in childhood carry to adulthood and cause symptoms that we don't know about. Now, you can have a person who thinks, I'm having sex with lots of different people because that's what I want to do. And they believe that, and they think that is true. But there most likely is something from their childhood that they don't realize is connected. They don't think to themselves, my father was unkind to me, and so therefore I'm having sex with lots of people. They don't realize, oh, my mother showed me sexual videos as a child, and now I'm having sex with lots of people. So we need to be aware when we are counseling people that the reason is not necessarily something the person knows yet. And it might take some time to work out what is going on in their hearts. And those conversations need to happen very delicately. I want us to think just for a minute about something that let's see if I can think of a good example. My accent. Like, I'm an American, and so therefore I sound American. Even when I try really hard, when I'm home in Kenya and I'm speaking Swahili, I try really hard to speak Swahili perfectly, but my accent is always going to be something that sounds slightly American, no matter how hard I try or how much I practice. It's the same way with things that we learn in childhood. Okay, when I learn through circumstances that I am worthless, if I learn that as a child, it will take me the rest of my life to learn that God loves me and that I am not worthless. So we need to have so much grace with people we're counseling with, because many, if not most of them, are dealing with these childhood wounds that take time to heal. So I want us to, you don't have to say out loud. If you would like to share, please do. And even maybe you have experience personally or with someone you've counseled with. But what do you think is an example of something from childhood or young adulthood that could lead someone to engage in sexual sin? I've mentioned some of the examples, but you might have something more specific to your culture. Again, you don't have to say it out loud, but just be thinking of like, what are some examples that you can think of or have heard of? And feel free to say anything in the comments. I don't see where oh, there it is. Oh, we actually have some chats. I'm sorry, I've been missing chats. So this was back when we were talking about common sins. Fornication is more common, especially among youths. Some of the sex without a husband in African culture. A mama I recently assisted in her birth is having difficulty of getting rid of the man who impregnated her. She is in a bad situation right now and they're unmarried. Oh, that is very hard. Someone who had experienced abuse, yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that one. Lynn, is that your name? Tell me if that's wrong. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So yes, people who have, people who have been abused. I'm going to kind of try to explain, because in your mind, it's like, wait, you were abused sexually, and now you're having sex with lots of people. You think that that would be the opposite. It's kind of like, I got injured by a knife, and I love playing with knives. But what it happens is that we all have a sense of privacy and what is appropriate for our bodies. And this is something that we learn on our own. Children all over the world, they reach a point at around the same age where they don't want people to just see them naked all the time. They want to be clothed, they want to be covered. And even in cultures where clothing is smaller, and then clothing where, you go to some places in the world, people are covered from head to toe, and some places where they're covered with small amounts of clothing, but they are covered. And so we all reach a point where we like, oh, I don't want to be touched like that. And I only want to be touched, like by my husband or my parents. So we all have this sense, and picture it like walls. You have safety walls around you. And when someone gets too close, when someone touches you the wrong way. When you are abused as a child, what happens is you are growing and learning to understand what is appropriate. And then someone interrupts that process. So you hadn't finished building your walls yet, and someone broke your walls. And so therefore, sometimes people grow and say, well, I have no walls because my walls were broken as a little kid. And so now I don't have them. And that causes extreme sexual behavior. Some people, their walls move closer in. So they still have them, but they're letting people get way too close. When I was in college, I was mentoring a young girl. She was 16 years old, and I was very confused with how much she was touching me. She was just touching me all the time and being very close to me. And I felt like this was not normal. I've been around other people. She gets closer than other people. And when I talked to our pastor, our pastor's wife, she said that she had confided in her that she had been abused as a child. So that was an example of her walls had moved closer to where she was too comfortable with being too close. So yeah, when we are abused as children, it turns into not fully understanding what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. The chat box keeps disappearing to where I can't see it. So Amy, let me know if I get any chats. I don't know where it's going.
All right.
Now, the reason I wanted to do this talk specifically on women is because in our ministries, we will counsel more women than we will men. Hopefully, we get lots of husbands and boyfriends and fathers to come into our ministry, but we know that a lot of the times we get the women. I also wanted to talk about it because there's a lot of resources that talk about sexual sin for men. Lots and lots of resources. There's less resources on women. This creates a lie that, oh, women don't struggle with it as much. And so it just shouldn't be a priority. But the truth is that when you look at adultery, with having sex with multiple people, with pornography, women almost have as much problem as men. So there are some differences in how this impacts women versus men. Now, I've given some examples. These are not all of them. And these are not also like, so for instance, one of the things that I have under the men's section is a sense of control. You might have a woman who is struggling in sexual sin because she's trying to have a sense of control. So this is not an always situation. It's just a little bit of something where you can kind of see some differences on average. So feel free to look over the men's section, but I am going to focus over on the women's section. Women engaging in sexual sin are oftentimes seeking healing of emotional wounds. They're seeking connection. And that can be another thing very similarly to what we were talking earlier about how you will have children who are abused, their walls are broken or too close. Well, when women are seeking connection through sexual sin, it is not good connection. It's not real intimacy. And so it confirms in their mind that this broken form of connecting with a man, that's the normal, when it's not. And so it continues the process of breaking parts of their brain, basically. There, a lot of times women are seeking proof that they're worthy or desirable. My brother does a lot of men's ministry, and I really like the way he describes it. He said that women, the way that God designed men is to earn their worth. They are warriors. They are protectors. They are providers. They build their worth, and they bring in a woman into that worth. Whereas women are born valuable. They are born with worth, and sometimes the world chips away at that worth and takes it away, and then she is dirty. Then she is undesirable. And so, if a woman doesn't know that this sexual sin is the reason she feels undesirable, she will keep engaging in it, seeking that worthiness, seeking that desirableness. Sometimes women will do it out of fear. They are afraid that their boyfriend will stop helping them financially if they don't keep sleeping with him. They think that they will lose their community or whatever it might be. They're afraid of losing something. They're afraid of being unsafe. I know women who have stayed in relationships with men because they were told that they would not be provided for if they didn't continue to provide the sexual sin. And there are people who have been engaged to be married for years, and the boyfriend just, oh, I'll marry you next year. I'll marry you next year. But if you stop sleeping with me, I'll leave you. Things like that. They're trying to ease emotional pain. They're trying to resolve past trauma. And we have to remember that if this person is not a believer in God, or they are a very young believer in God, they do not have the tools to overcome sexual sin. They just do not. God designed women in marriage to be a helper for men. Now, what I find really interesting about this verse from Genesis, right when he created Eve, is that this word helper, I don't know how it is in your languages, but in my language, it's a person who's there to help. Maybe like a servant or a person that's delivering something. But when we look at the original language that this verse was written in, the word helper is used other times in the Bible, and it's used in instances of battle. So it means someone who is fighting in battle with you. Okay, this is like a two soldiers side by side fighting the enemy Satan. So this is not someone who God views as weak and a servant or someone you are dragging along. This is someone who's in battle with you. So we talked earlier about, how having 10 or more and this is lifetime. Okay. So from, whenever the person starts engaging in sexual activity until the end of their life. And in America, 10 is considered a low number for how many people you have had sex with. And there are people who have had sex with 100 different people. So we're increasing the risk on our health. And I'm not going to go into the verses about marriage this time because I do want to make sure we end close to 10, and it's already 9:56. So, but these verses are going to be made available to you, and they're in the chat right now. So I encourage you to look over them because understanding marriage is very important for us. And just very briefly, we talked earlier about how Satan lies and says that sex outside of marriage is fun and exciting, and sex inside of marriage is boring and old. But we see people who have had sexual relationships with only one person have improved health. They sleep better. They have better mental health, better physical health, and overall have a happier life. So those are just some of the lies that we have to overcome as leaders. When we are helping individuals find healing, before you try to help them with their sexual journey, you have first got to lead them to Christ because they cannot overcome this sin without Jesus. And so as it's so tempting if we get a woman coming to us seeking counseling and she says, "Oh, I have 5 boyfriends and I'm sleeping with all of them." We want to fix that. We want to say, "Please stop doing that." We want to say, "Come away from it." But we have got to focus on leading her to Christ because we cannot make her change. We cannot fix her brokenness. God can. God can help her heal. And when she comes to Christ, even then, our job is not to fix her. Our job is not to say, "You've been doing these bad things. Now you're with Jesus and you need to stop." Our goal is to continue to help her understand who God is, help her grow a deeper relationship. And of course, we don't say, "Keep having sexual sin. It's fine." No, we be honest with her about what her sin is doing to her and how it's impacting her. But only Jesus can really fix it. And the closer we get this person to Jesus, the closer and stronger they will be in their ability to fight this sin. Overall, and especially when dealing with sexual sin, we must remember how God views us, that we all have sinned and we all fall short of the glory of God. When I'm counseling with a woman, I don't sit from a place where I have only had sex with one person, so I am a better Christian and I can help fix this person. That is not the right attitude to have because it's not the truth. The truth is, I have sinned, she has sinned, and we're working on this together. We're growing together. And we all did not earn our salvation. Okay, I'm not a Christian because I'm so good at everything and I hardly sin and I am such a great person. I have salvation because God said I could have it, and even though I didn't earn it, He gave it to me, and He offers it to all of us. So we always have to meet equally. When we're sitting down talking with someone who is struggling with sexual sin, what we need to remember is that battling sexual sin is not about being strong enough. It's not about, "Oh, you just got to tough it up and figure it out." This is one of the sexual sin is Satan's most powerful weapon. It changes things in your brain. It confuses your spirit. It is extremely powerful, but God is more powerful. We are not more powerful. God is more powerful. Change can only happen when we do two things: have a relationship with God, and two, understand the why. If we don't help this woman understand why she's doing sexual sin, she can never fully heal. So let's go back to our example of a woman who was abused as a child and her walls are super close. If she doesn't understand that, she can't begin moving those walls out and building them stronger. So she will think, oh, I have not engaged in sexual sin for a month. I'm doing so much better. But then someone is going to come. And because her wall has not been growing or moving out, she's going to let them right back in. So we always have to focus on the root of the problem. And remember, the person you're counseling probably doesn't know what the root is yet. And that will take a lot of time and conversation. And we have to be patient. I have been counseling with a friend of mine who has been, well, so here's the story. We went to college together. We are the same age. We were born in the same year. We were married the same year. We both have two children that are the same ages. And we both are working at jobs that we love. And we both have very good, strong, godly Christian husbands. Now, there is a difference, though. My friend fell into sexual sin. It started with pornography that led to affairs. And when you look at our lives now, you see one life that is happy and fulfilled, and one life that is broken. And it's not just that her marriage is broken, she is broken. She does not look like the same person that I met almost 15 years ago. She is anxious all the time. Whereas when we were young, she was bold and she was excited and she was the person that everybody wanted to be friends with. Now she's so anxious and afraid, she hides in her home and she has two friends. And she is miserable all the time. Whereas she used to be a person who just was so full of life and happy. The difference between us is only the sexual sin. And she has tried over and over to, oh, well, I'll stop. I'll just stop right now and then be done. But she tried to stop without Jesus. She's tried to stop without discovering the root of her sin. And it has been years of encouraging and helping her. And my friends, I want her to have had an instant, easy healing. I want her to have said one magic word and then she's all better. But that is not the case because she spent years in sexual sin. And so we cannot fix that overnight. We have to be patient and we have to look at the process. I'm going to check the chat real quick because it actually popped up for me. Okay, you're very welcome. I don't know your name, but you're very welcome. I'm glad that the training is helping you. It is helping me as well. We have a little time for question and answers. And I know that, again, you might be around sensitive ears. You feel free to type into the chat if you need to ask a question privately. Also, you're more than welcome to email us separately if you have questions, especially about things that are delicate. I totally understand. Real quick, while you guys think of your questions, I am going to show you something. One of the resources that I sent you, or I'm sorry, that Amy sent you, is a workbook that I put together for you guys on this topic. So this workbook is not something that I think you should just give to someone. I think that it can help, but I don't think that that is the best way to use it. The best way to use it is to sit down one-on-one counseling with these women or men. I tried to make it look to where men would find it appealing and women. So there's always going to be a little bit of instruction and then some places where you can ask questions and make notes. So there is 5 sessions in this workbook to where you can sit down. And there's homework to give at the end of each session to where you send this page home with them. so that they can read these Bible verses and write down their thoughts about them. And I'm also going to show you another resource, which I'm going to have Amy send you. This website is called The Freedom Fight. It has a lot of free resources to help people struggling with sexual sin. It also has some resources that cost money. If you reach out to them, they do say that they will give discounts when they can. So please feel free to email them. But you see this section says free resources. They have all sorts of things to help you when you're counseling someone specifically with pornography, which is the growing sexual sin in our world, and it's becoming more and more easily accessible. But you can see so many resources, okay, and even more. So my computer's running slow, so I'm not going to show it all to you, but there is ways to help. I also want to take a moment before we close that some of us in this session might be struggling with a sexual sin. And one of the big things that Satan lies to us about is, oh, you're a leader. You should know better. You shouldn't have that temptation. You can't tell anybody, because if you do, you will lose your leadership abilities. You will lose your influence. And I just want to tell you that that is not true. I was a leader in ministry when I fell into pornography years ago. And there is no shame. There is only healing. And you cannot do it by yourself. Me trying to do it by myself is what made me fall into that sin. It was when I entered into the battle with my husband and Jesus that I was able to fully overcome. And now, because of that, I've had the ability to counsel my friend, and not in a way where, oh, this is what I've read, this is what I've heard. But God has used my past to give me something to help her. And that's how amazing our God is. Because when we live a life free of sin, then, we have that amazing story to tell of, like, look what God has done. And then when we fall into sin and we find healing, then look at these stories we have to help encourage others. So if you are struggling with sexual sin, do not flee from shame and talk to a respected person. Start with one person, one trusted leader, your pastor, a fellow ministry leader, a parent, someone who will not turn around and tell everybody else. It needs to be just between you and this person for starters. And then you and them can start working on who to confess from there. Thank you, guys. I love all of you, and those who couldn't come, I love all of them too. Like, I'm always so grateful and to just be with you guys, and you are all over the world doing amazing things for God. And I feel like in a moment like this, we each get a piece of each other's ministry and get a piece to see what God is doing on such a big scale. So thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the time.